Waking in the dead of night, she heard her husband on the phone with his mistress, calmly assuring her that by tomorrow she'd be dead. The 7,500-square-foot mansion, he promised, would be all theirs. The next day, his mother got a call. Her son had been in a terrible accident and was gone. That night, a relentless storm broke. Heavy raindrops lashed against the glass of the 7,500-square-foot mansion, a cold, rhythmic drumming like a mournful dirge. I lay on the expensive, plush mattress, a chill seeping into my bones despite the warmth of the room, my eyes fixed on the oppressive darkness of the ceiling. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 2 a.m., but my husband, Ethan, had not yet come to bed. In 5 years of marriage, I had never felt this house to be so vast, so empty, so frighteningly silent as it was tonight. They say a woman's intuition is a powerful thing, especially when her marriage is teetering on the brink of collapse. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, a fiery anxiety churning in my stomach. A sense of deep unease crept through me, compelling me to get out of bed and go to the kitchen for a glass of warm water. The mansion was shrouded in darkness, save for the faint, yellow glow of a nightlight in the long, cavernous hallway. I walked silently on the cold marble floor, my bare feet making no sound. As I passed Ethan's study, I noticed a thin sliver of light escaping from under the door. He was working late again, as he often did. A pang of sympathy, mixed with guilt, stirred within me. For 5 years, I had lived the life of a wealthy man's wife, draped in luxury, yet I had failed to give this family an heir. His parents, Richard and Carol Albright, never missed an opportunity to remind me of my failing with sharp, cutting remarks. Ethan, however, always played the part of the model husband, comforting me and telling me not to put so much pressure on myself. Thinking of that false compassion, which I had once mistaken for a blessing, I decided to open the door and gently urge him to come to bed. But my hand froze on the cold doorknob. A voice drifted from within, not the warm, loving tone I heard every day, but one so cold and ruthless it was unrecognizable. Ethan was on the phone, his voice a tense hiss filled with bitter impatience. "Just relax," he was saying. "Everything is arranged. Tomorrow is our 5th anniversary. I'm taking her on a trip up the coast to Big Sur to rekindle the romance." I stood rooted to the spot, my heart hammering against my ribs. Her? Was he talking about me? I held my breath, pressing my ear against the thick oak door, straining to catch every word. The person on the other end was clearly a woman, because Ethan's voice suddenly turned sickeningly sweet. "I've already hired a guy named Mitch to handle it," he continued. "That stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway is deserted, and the fog rolls in thick. All it takes is one little nudge on the wheel, and the car goes over the cliff. They'll rule it a tragic accident." He chuckled. "You just wait for the good news. Once that useless wife of mine is gone, this mansion and the $10 million insurance policy are all ours. I've put up with her and her family for long enough." The world spun. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. My legs turned to jelly, and I had to lean against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. The man I had shared a bed with for 5 years, the man who constantly professed his love and protection, was plotting to murder me in the most brutal way imaginable. His words were like daggers, shredding my heart until I could barely breathe. Flashes of the false happiness he had so carefully constructed played in my mind. The vibrant bouquets of roses on holidays, the family dinners where he'd lovingly place food on my plate in front of his parents. It was all a perfect act, a mask for the monster beneath. He was having an affair with some woman, and worse, he wanted me dead to steal my inheritance. I heard his footsteps pacing inside, then a self-satisfied laugh. "My parents have wanted her gone for years," he added. "But this way, we get all her assets without looking like the bad guys. You should start planning our celebration now." Tears streamed down my face, hot and salty on my lips. I wanted to storm in, to claw at him, to demand why he would treat me so cruelly. What had I done wrong? I had served his family, endured his parents' contempt, and even used my own personal savings to support his business ventures. And in return, a death sentence meticulously planned for our wedding anniversary. But a cold, clear voice of reason told me not to act rashly. If I confronted him now, he might kill me on the spot, and my death would be dismissed as a household accident. No one would ever know the truth. I had to live. I had to live to expose this killer for who he was. I had to get justice for myself and for the blind love I had so foolishly given him. I forced my heavy limbs to carry me back to the bedroom. Each step was a fresh stab of pain in my chest. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers over my head, my body racked with shivers of fear and rage. The rain outside continued its relentless assault, as if trying to wash away the filth of this house. It was the longest night of my life. I lay perfectly still, feigning sleep, but my ears were alert to every sound. 30 minutes later, Ethan quietly opened the door. He slipped into bed beside me, his arm wrapping around my waist as it did every night. His touch made my skin crawl, and a wave of nausea rose in my throat. I had to bite my lip until it bled to prevent myself from recoiling. He whispered into my ear, "Sleep well, my love. We have a very special day ahead of us." His words sounded like a final farewell from the Grim Reaper. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking from the corners, and made a silent vow. "Ethan, you want me dead, but I won't go that easily. There is justice in this world. The man you married is gone. The woman who wakes up tomorrow will be someone you no longer recognize, and she will make your entire family pay for this cruelty." Morning light pierced through the curtains, signaling the start of a new day. But for me, it was not a day of happy celebration. It was the beginning of a fight for my life. I rose earlier than usual and went to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face to clear my head. Staring at my haggard reflection in the mirror, my eyes swollen from a night of silent weeping, I told myself to be calm. I had to play the part of the happy, unsuspecting wife perfectly. I applied light makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes and chose a seafoam green dress that Ethan had once said he loved on me. When I went downstairs, Ethan was already in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee and blueberry pancakes filling the air. Seeing me, he turned with a radiant smile, his eyes sparkling with a practiced affection. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said. "I had your favorite pancakes delivered from the diner. We have a long drive ahead, so you need to eat up." I looked at the stack of pancakes, my stomach twisting in knots. I used to be so moved by these small gestures, thanking God for such a thoughtful husband. Now, the sight of the food made me sick. Was this his idea of a last meal before sending me to my death? Or had he drugged them to make his task easier? I forced a weak smile. "Thank you, honey. You're always so thoughtful." Ethan pulled out a chair for me, urging me to eat before they got cold. He sat across from me, watching me with a scrutinizing gaze, occasionally glancing at the clock with an air of impatience. His parents, Richard and Carol, came downstairs. Seeing us ready to leave, Carol sneered. "Another anniversary trip? What a waste of money. Instead of gallivanting around, you should be focused on family matters. A woman who can't even produce an heir is worthless, no matter how much money she's worth." Her words were like salt in an open wound. For 5 years, I had listened to this abuse. I had choked down bitter herbal remedies, undergone countless painful fertility treatments, and prayed at every church, all for the hope of a child. But the result was always the same. His entire family blamed me, treating me as the sole reason the Albright family name was in jeopardy. Ethan quickly intervened. "Mom, please, don't upset her. Today is a happy day for us. Maybe this trip is just what we need to relax and get some good news." Richard just grunted from his armchair, not even bothering to look at me. "Just be careful with the car. It's a brand new Mercedes. Don't scratch the paint." I ate each bite of pancake as if it were a hot coal. The coldness of this family, the cruelty of the man sitting before me, made me realize how foolish I had been to cling to the illusion of a happy home. I discreetly turned on the voice recorder on my phone, hiding it in my purse. I needed proof. After breakfast, Ethan hurried me to the car, constantly checking his phone. I noticed his hand trembled slightly as he held the keys. Was he nervous, or just excited for his crime to be committed? Out in the driveway, the sleek, black Mercedes gleamed. It was the car my parents had helped us buy as a wedding gift, though the title was in Ethan's name. He opened the door for me, a perfect gentleman. I hesitated for a moment, feeling as if I were stepping into my own coffin. Before the car pulled away, I looked back at the mansion one last time. It had once been my dream, but now it was a tomb. I swore to myself that if I made it back alive, I would drive every last one of these cruel people out of it. This house was partly mine, built with my own family's money, and I would not let them steal it from me. Ethan started the engine, and the car glided out of the gate. He put on a romantic ballad, the same one we had danced to at our wedding. The music filled the confined space, making the atmosphere even more suffocating. I sat silently, staring ahead, my hands gripping the seatbelt. In my purse, my phone was silently recording, ready to bear witness to the crime that was about to unfold. The car sped down the highway, leaving the bustling city behind. Ethan drove fast, glancing in the rearview mirror as if watching for someone. I sat in the passenger seat, maintaining a calm facade, asking occasional, innocuous questions to avoid suspicion. "Honey, why are we leaving so early? I thought we were heading out around noon," I asked. He flinched. "Just wanted to get an early start, beat the traffic," he explained, his voice a little too high-pitched. "I want to have the whole day with you. We can have lunch overlooking the ocean." His voice was still sweet, but I could hear the tremor in it. A thin sheen of sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the air conditioning blasting cold air. He wasn't feeling guilt. He was afraid of getting caught. We began the ascent into the coastal mountains, the road twisting and turning in sharp hairpin bends. On one side was a sheer rock face, on the other, a terrifying drop to the churning ocean below. A thick fog began to roll in, obscuring visibility. This was the perfect setting he had described on the phone. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine. The moment was near. Suddenly, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression soured, and he quickly silenced the call. "Who was that?" I asked innocently. "Aren't you going to answer?" "Just a spam call," he mumbled. "Don't want them to ruin the mood." But a few minutes later, a barrage of text messages came through. Ethan grew agitated, his grip on the steering wheel faltering. He pulled the car over onto a deserted gravel shoulder. "You wait here for a second," he said. I think I felt a wobble. "Need to check the tires. It's dangerous on these roads." I nodded, my senses on high alert. He got out and walked to the back of the car. Through the side mirror, I saw him not checking the tires at all, but furtively making a phone call. He was pacing, gesturing wildly, his face flushed with anger. He was arguing with someone. Quietly, I unbuckled my seatbelt, my hand on the door handle, ready to bolt. I cracked the window just enough to listen. The wind was howling, but I could make out snippets of his conversation. "What do you mean you're backing out now?" he snarled into the phone. "I already paid you the deposit. If you won't do it, I'll find someone who will. Don't you dare try to play me." So, the hired killer, Mitch, was causing problems. Maybe he wanted more money. This was my chance. If their plan was falling apart, I might have more time. Ethan hung up, kicked the tire in frustration, and got back into the driver's seat. His face was a mask of fury, the charming facade completely gone. He said nothing as he slammed the car into gear and sped off. "Is everything okay with the car?" I asked timidly. "It's fine," he snapped. "Just sit still and stop asking so many questions." His abrupt change in demeanor confirmed my suspicions. His plan was unraveling. We drove for another 10 minutes before Ethan suddenly slammed on the brakes. A large, rusty tow truck was blocking the road. A tall, heavily tattooed man with a menacing face stepped out and waved for us to stop. Ethan's face went pale. He muttered a curse under his breath. He turned to me. "Stay in the car, lock the doors, and do not get out no matter what. Let me see what this is about." I watched as Ethan walked toward the stranger. They spoke in tense, hushed tones. The tattooed man pointed angrily at Ethan, then at our car. Ethan seemed to shrink, pulling out his wallet and offering the man a wad of cash. The man slapped his hand away and began dragging Ethan toward the tow truck. I was terrified. Was this Mitch, the man hired to kill me? Why was he threatening Ethan? Or was this a staged robbery to make the whole thing look more convincing? Just then, the man shoved Ethan to the ground and jumped into the driver's seat of our Mercedes. He started the engine. I screamed, fumbling with the door, but the central lock was engaged from the driver's side. The stranger turned to me with a greasy, yellow-toothed grin. "Just sit tight, pretty lady. he slurred, the reek of alcohol filling the car. "Your husband just traded you and this sweet ride to me. I'm gonna take you on a trip you'll never forget." The car shot forward. I looked back through the rear window and saw Ethan scrambling to his feet, chasing us for a few yards before collapsing onto the road, watching helplessly. But his expression wasn't one of concern for me. It was the raw terror of a man who had just lost a very expensive car and his $10 million payday. The car careened down the winding road at a terrifying speed. The man, who I now knew was Mitch, was drunk and rambling, cursing Ethan for being a cheap coward who tried to shortchange him. He said he was taking the car as payment, and as for me, he'd figure that out later. I realized this was no longer Ethan's plan. Mitch had gone rogue. My life was now in the hands of a drunk, enraged criminal. I had to think fast. I saw my phone still in my purse. The signal was weak, but I managed to send a text to Jessica, my lawyer friend. It was short and frantic. "Help me. PCH. Carjacked." Just as I hit send, the car swerved violently. The drunk driver lost control on a sharp curve. The vehicle smashed through the guardrail with a deafening screech of metal. The world turned upside down as the car tumbled end over end, plunging into the abyss. In that terrifying moment, all I could think of were my parents and the injustice I was leaving behind. I closed my eyes and surrendered to fate. There was a massive explosion, and then only darkness. I awoke to an agonizing pain that radiated through my entire body. It felt as if every bone had been shattered. The smell of damp earth and burnt gasoline filled my nostrils, making me cough. I opened my eyes to a canopy of dense forest leaves obscuring the sky. It took me a long moment to piece together what had happened. The car had gone over the cliff. In the chaos, the passenger door had been ripped open upon impact with the guardrail, and I had been thrown out, landing in a thicket of bushes halfway down the slope. The car, with the drunk driver inside, had continued its descent to the bottom of the ravine. I tried to move my limbs. Miraculously, despite the cuts and bruises, nothing seemed to be broken. I grabbed onto tree roots, slowly and painfully clawing my way back up to the road. Looking down, I saw a column of black smoke rising from the canyon floor, punctuated by small explosions. Mitch was dead. He had died in the trap Ethan had set for me. Just as I reached the edge of the road, I heard the wail of sirens in the distance. Police cars and an ambulance were approaching. I quickly hid behind a large boulder. I couldn't reveal myself yet. I needed to see what game Ethan would play next. I reached into my jacket pocket. My phone screen was shattered, but it was still working. With trembling fingers, I called Jessica. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic with worry. "Jessica," I choked out. "It's me. I'm alive." 30 minutes later, Jessica picked me up at a discreet bend in the road, far from the cordoned-off crash site. Seeing my torn clothes and blood-streaked face, she burst into tears. She took me to a private clinic owned by a trusted friend to have my wounds treated, insisting I keep the fact that I was alive a secret. The real show was about to begin. Meanwhile, back at the mansion in Greenwich, Carol Albright was preparing a lavish lunch. She hummed to herself as she set the table, giddy with the thought that her despised daughter-in-law was finally out of her son's life. Suddenly, the landline rang. Wiping her hands on her apron, she answered. The voice on the other end was a grim-faced police officer. "Hello. Am I speaking to the residence of Mr. Ethan Albright, the registered owner of a black Mercedes license plate?" the officer asked. "We regret to inform you that this vehicle was involved in an accident on the Pacific Coast Highway. The driver was killed on impact. The body was burned beyond recognition, and we need next of kin to come and identify the remains." Carol's legs gave out. The phone slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. She let out a strangled cry and fainted onto the sofa. Richard, hearing the commotion, rushed in. When Carol came to, she began to wail hysterically. "Ethan! My boy Ethan! Why did you leave me?" The house erupted into chaos. They were certain the driver was Ethan. It was his car, and he was the one driving to Big Sur. They had no idea a fateful swap had occurred. Jessica drove me back to the mansion. We arrived just as Richard was helping a distraught Carol into their car, presumably to head to the hospital or the morgue. When I stepped out of Jessica's car, disheveled and bandaged, but very much alive, they both froze as if they had seen a ghost. Carol's eyes widened in horror. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Are you a ghost? What are you doing here? Where is Ethan?" I feigned hysteria, running and collapsing at Carol's feet. "Mom, it was horrible," I cried. "We were carjacked. The man pushed Ethan out of the car and took me. I managed to jump out just before it went over the cliff." Ethan must still be up there on the road." Hearing this, Carol's grief turned to frantic hope. She immediately ordered their driver to head for California. I got in the car with them, a cold, silent smile playing on my lips. The play had only just begun. The family's private jet flew us to Monterey, and from there a car rushed us to the county hospital. Throughout the journey, Carol sobbed and prayed for her son's safety. She never once asked how I was, if I was in pain. In her eyes, my life wasn't worth a fraction of her son's. I sat quietly in the corner, observing the selfish, artificial panic of my in-laws. At the hospital, the sterile, somber atmosphere of the morgue was suffocating. A state trooper met us, offered his condolences, and led us in to identify the body. On a cold metal gurney lay a charred, contorted corpse covered by a white sheet. Next to it, on a small tray, were the few personal effects that had survived the fire: a scorched designer wallet and a gold Rolex watch with a diamond-studded bezel. The moment Carol saw the watch, she let out a piercing scream and threw herself onto the corpse. "It's Ethan's watch! It's my son! Oh, my boy, why did this happen to you?" She wept until she nearly collapsed, held up by two nurses. Richard stood beside her, his own eyes welling with tears as he touched the burned wallet. I stood back, a grim satisfaction rising within me. The wallet and watch were indeed Ethan's, but they had obviously been stolen by Mitch before he hijacked the car. And now, these expensive trinkets were causing his parents to mourn the death of their son's would-be murderer. At the peak of this tragic scene, the morgue door swung open. A man staggered and disheveled, covered in dirt, and walking with a limp. It was Ethan. The room fell silent. Carol, in mid-sob, looked up and stared, dumbfounded. Richard rubbed his eyes, unable to believe what he was seeing. And Ethan, when he saw me standing there, alive and well, staring back at him with icy composure, recoiled as if he'd been struck. "Ava," he stammered, his face draining of all color. "You're not dead?" Carol was the first to react. She rushed to Ethan, touching him all over, now crying with joy. "My son, you're alive! Then who is that?" Ethan was still in shock, his terrified gaze locked on me. He couldn't comprehend how I had survived. I walked toward him and took his hand, my voice choked with fake emotion, but my grip was like a vice. "Oh, Ethan, thank God you're safe. I thought that monster had killed you. I was so lucky to escape. Heaven was watching over us, wasn't it?" Ethan managed a weak nod, sweat pouring down his face. He knew his plan had failed spectacularly, and not only had he lost his car, but his parents had nearly held a funeral for him. The trooper cleared his throat. "Mr. Albright, can you explain who the deceased is, and why he had your wallet and watch?" Ethan stammered, his eyes darting around. That's the carjacker, officer. He ambushed me, knocked me out, and stole everything. He must have been drunk and driven himself off the cliff." I smirked inwardly. His lies were smooth, but he had no idea he was no longer the director of this drama. After giving preliminary statements, our family was escorted to the local sheriff's department for detailed questioning. Ethan sat across from a detective, his hands trembling. He tried to paint himself as the victim of a violent crime, but the sweat on his brow and his shifty eyes betrayed him. The detective pressed him for details about the carjacker, but Ethan claimed it all happened so fast he couldn't remember the man's face. I sat beside him, occasionally interjecting with details that seemed helpful but were actually tightening the noose around his neck. "You know, Ethan," I said to the detective, "I seem to remember you talking to that man for a while before he got in the car. It looked like you handed him some money, and your wallet too. Are you sure he just grabbed it?" Ethan shot me a murderous glare. "You're confused, Ava. I was terrified. I gave him the cash hoping he'd leave us alone. Don't muddle the investigation with your nonsense." The detective narrowed his eyes at Ethan, then turned to me with renewed interest. I quickly feigned fear, shrinking back and apologizing, saying I must have been in shock. But I knew the seed of doubt had been planted. When the detective produced the wallet found on the body, Ethan hesitated. He didn't dare take it back, knowing it could contain evidence of his dark dealings with Mitch. "You can keep it as evidence," he said quickly. "I can get it back later." Leaving the station, Ethan let out a sigh of relief. But the moment we were outside, his demeanor changed. Back at our hotel, he dragged me into our suite and locked the door. He got in my face, his voice a low snarl. "You keep your mouth shut. If you say one more word about what you think you saw, you'll regret it." I looked him straight in the eye, my fear completely gone. "Why are you so tense, darling?" I replied coolly. "I'm your wife. Of course, I'm on your side. But you should be careful. These detectives are smart, and you know that man?" He looked familiar. "I think I've seen you talking to him at a coffee shop before." Ethan flinched and took a step back. "You're mistaken," he stammered. "I don't associate with people like that." He was rattled, afraid of what I might know. He wouldn't dare harm me now. I was the only witness, and I held the key to his downfall. Back in Greenwich, a dark cloud hung over the mansion. Although Ethan was safe, the loss of the expensive Mercedes and the police investigation had his parents on edge. Before we could even unpack, they summoned us to the living room for an emergency family meeting. Carol sat on her velvet armchair, clutching a string of pearls. "This family has had a run of bad luck," she declared, her voice laced with venom. "And it all started when she came into this house. She's a curse. First, no grandchildren, and now this." Richard nodded in agreement. "Your mother is right. That car was worth a fortune, and now the police are involved. To protect the family's assets, we think it's best if Ava signs this. It's a post-nuptial agreement, relinquishing her rights to all marital property. The house, the land, we'll put it in our names for safekeeping until this blows over." I listened, a cold rage building inside me. To them, I was nothing but a scapegoat and an obstacle to their greed. They were afraid I would divorce Ethan and take my share, so they wanted to strip me of everything. Ethan sat beside me, silent. He was hoping they would succeed so he wouldn't have to try to kill me again. Carol slid a prepared document and a pen across the coffee table. "Sign it, dear, for Ethan's sake. Our spiritual advisor said it's the only way to break the curse." I picked up the document. It was a complete forfeiture of all assets acquired during our marriage. Their greed was bottomless. I looked at their 3 expectant faces and then calmly placed the document back on the table. "You know, Richard, Carol," I said, my voice even but firm, "I understand your concern, but we are a married couple. There's no legal reason for me to sign away my rights. Unless, are you afraid I'm going to take what's mine?" Carol slammed her hand on the table. "How dare you? This house was built with Ethan's money. What have you ever contributed? Sign it or get out." The tension was palpable. Ethan still said nothing, watching me, expecting me to break down as I always had. He was wrong. Slowly, I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. From it, I produced a document with the official seal of a notary public. I placed it on top of their ridiculous agreement. "I believe you've all forgotten about this," I said with a small smile. 2 years ago, before Ethan's appendectomy, he was worried about complications, so he drew up this will. It states that in the event of his death, his entire estate, this house, his savings, his company shares, goes to his sole beneficiary. Me, his wife, Ava. 3 jaws dropped. Carol snatched the paper, her hands shaking as she read it. It was Ethan's signature, and the notary stamp was authentic. Ethan's face went ashen. He remembered. He had done it as a grand romantic gesture to convince me of his undying love, which prompted me to invest the last of my personal inheritance into his latest business venture. He never thought he'd actually die, so he signed it to manipulate me. Now, that piece of paper was my shield and his death warrant. "Of course," I continued calmly, "Ethan is alive and well, so the will isn't in effect. But it clearly shows his wishes. Why would you ask me to go against the desires of your own son? Or are you perhaps hoping he dies soon so you can fight his widow for the inheritance?" They were speechless. Carol crumpled her agreement in her fist, her face purple with rage. Ethan was trapped. He couldn't deny the will without admitting to his emotional and financial manipulation. I retrieved my document and placed it safely back in my purse. I stood up. I'm very tired. I'm going to my room to rest. From now on, let's not speak of assets again. What is mine will remain mine. No one can steal it. And as for things that aren't yours, sometimes, when you grasp too greedily, you end up paying a very high price. I turned and walked away, leaving 3 people frozen in their fury. Each step I took up the grand staircase felt like a victory. I had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The next morning, I told them I was going to church to pray, but I went straight to Jessica's law office downtown. She was my best friend from college, a brilliant and fiercely loyal woman. She hugged me the moment I walked in, fussing over my healing bruises. Amidst a world of deceit, her friendship was my only anchor. I recounted everything, from the night of the phone call to the confrontation with Ethan's parents. When I told her about their attempt to make me sign away my assets, she slammed her fist on her desk. "They are absolute monsters," she seethed. "But you handled it perfectly. That will was a masterstroke. Now we need a solid legal strategy to corner them." Jessica explained that while Ethan's affair was grounds for divorce, proving attempted murder would require more than a muffled voice recording. We needed to definitively link him to Mitch. If we could prove he hired Mitch to kill me, he would face life in prison. Jessica also advised me to immediately file a motion to freeze all our joint assets to prevent Ethan from moving money. She looked at me, her eyes full of determination. "You have to be strong, Ava. This is about more than money. It's about your life and your honor. I'm with you all the way. We are going to unmask that monster." I felt a surge of strength. I asked Jessica to recommend a good private investigator. I wanted to know everything about Chloe, Ethan's mistress. Who was she? What was her connection to Mitch? And most importantly, what secrets did she know? Leaving Jessica's office, I felt empowered. I stopped at an electronics store and bought a high-quality pen recorder and several micro cameras. I was going to turn that mansion into a trap, and Ethan was about to walk right into it. When I got home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Ethan was out, likely trying to bribe someone to make his legal troubles disappear or meeting his mistress. His parents were holed up in their wing of the house, plotting their next move. It was the perfect opportunity. I went to Ethan's study. It was his sanctuary, a place no one was allowed to enter. But in his panic, he had forgotten to lock it. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and whiskey. Papers were strewn across his desk. I ignored them and went straight to a large oil painting on the wall. Behind it was a state-of-the-art safe. Ethan was a paranoid man, but he was also superstitious. He believed numbers associated with happy memories brought him good fortune. He had once told me that our first date was the luckiest day of his life, as he had landed a huge contract that same day. With trembling fingers, I typed in the date of our first date 6 years ago, the 12th of October 2018. A green light flashed, and the heavy steel door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, gold bars, and property deeds. But what caught my eye was a black, leather-bound ledger and a small USB drive tucked in a corner. The ledger detailed millions of dollars in off-the-books payments, bribes to city officials, kickbacks on construction projects, and more. I plugged the USB into his laptop. It contained encrypted files detailing his illegal business practices, fraudulent contracts, and a list of offshore bank accounts used for money laundering and tax evasion. This was it. The silver bullet. This was enough to send him to prison for decades, not just for trying to kill me, but for being a high-level white-collar criminal. I quickly copied the entire drive to my phone and uploaded it to a secure cloud server. I took photos of every page in the black ledger. I placed everything back exactly as I had found it, closed the safe, and wiped my fingerprints from the keypad. Just as I closed the study door, I heard Ethan's car pull into the driveway. I rushed back to my room and feigned sleep. A few minutes later, he came in, looked at me for a long moment, then went into the bathroom. As the water ran, I clutched my phone, the evidence of his entire corrupt life resting in the palm of my hand. Your end is near, Ethan, I thought. 3 days later, the private investigator delivered a file. The contents made my blood run cold. Mitch, whose real name was Mitchell Vance, was a known enforcer for a local mob with a long criminal record. More shockingly, he was the first cousin of Chloe, Ethan's mistress. The affair wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. Chloe had brokered the deal for Ethan to hire her own cousin to murder me. The investigator also provided bank statements showing a $50,000 wire transfer from Ethan to Mitch 2 days before the accident. The memo line read, "Construction supplies." Jessica called me with more news. "Ava, I pulled Mitch's medical records from his hometown clinic. The guy had a history of severe epilepsy and was a chronic alcoholic. Ethan hiring someone that unstable proves he wanted to create the perfect, random-looking accident, but his cheapness and poor judgment ended up saving your life." I told Jessica to hold on to the evidence. I wanted to see how Ethan and Chloe would handle the fallout from Mitch's death. Chloe wouldn't let her cousin die for nothing, and Ethan would be desperate to silence her. Their greed would turn them against each other. That evening, I saw Ethan on the balcony, speaking furtively on the phone. I hid behind the curtain and activated my recorder. "I told you, I had nothing to do with it," Ethan hissed. "Mitch acted on his own. You got the money I sent. His death isn't my problem. If you keep pushing this, I'll cut you off completely." Chloe was clearly threatening him on the other end, because Ethan grew more agitated. "Fine," he finally snapped. "Tomorrow afternoon. The usual cafe. I'll bring something for his funeral expenses. Come alone, and don't try anything funny." I stopped the recording, a grim smile on my face. The fish had taken the bait. I texted Jessica, "Get the gear ready, we're going to the theater tomorrow." The cafe was a quiet, secluded spot, perfect for secret meetings. Jessica and I arrived 30 minutes early and chose a corner table shielded by potted plants with a clear view of Ethan's usual spot. With the help of a well-tipped waiter, we had already planted a micro camera and listening device under his table. At 3 p.m., Ethan arrived, disguised in sunglasses and a baseball cap. He ordered a black coffee and drummed his fingers nervously on the table. 10 minutes later, Chloe walked in. She was young and beautiful, but her eyes were red and swollen. "What are you going to do?" she demanded in a harsh whisper. "My family is in an uproar over Mitch's death. You said it was just a scare tactic, not this. Did you mean for him to die all along?" "Keep your voice down," Ethan hissed. "He got drunk and drove off a cliff. He was an idiot. What do you want now? For both of us to go to prison?" "Don't be so cavalier," Chloe sobbed. "He has a wife and kids. That $50,000 barely covered his gambling debts. I need another $100,000. Then I'll get my family to drop it." Ethan laughed, a twisted, ugly sound. "100,000? Do you think I'm made of money? My wife is still alive, and all my assets are tied up. Don't push me, Chloe. You have no idea what I'm capable of." From our corner, I listened to their every word through an earpiece, my blood boiling. They were haggling over a human life as if it were a commodity. Chloe's tone turned sharp. "Don't threaten me. I still have the texts and voicemails of you hiring Mitch to kill your wife. If you don't pay, I'll send them to the police. And to her." That was it. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He lunged across the table and slapped her hard, sending her sprawling from her chair. Other patrons stared. "You dare threaten me?" he snarled, his eyes bloodshot. "You're an accomplice. If I go down, you're coming with me. I'll make you disappear just like Mitch." Chloe held her cheek, tears of pain and fear streaming down her face. The man she thought loved her was a monster. Our devices captured everything. The tension at their table was explosive. After hitting her, Ethan lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. Chloe slowly picked herself up, her fear replaced by pure, unadulterated hatred. The slap had shattered any remaining illusions she had about him. She let out a bitter, sharp laugh. "You want to threaten me? You pathetic, useless man. No wonder your wife couldn't have a child in 5 years." Ethan froze, the cigarette falling from his lips. "What did you just say?" he whispered. Chloe's voice rose, heedless of the other customers. "Oh, you think I don't know? You're sterile, Ethan. You let your wife drink gallons of disgusting herbs. You let your whole family abuse her for being barren when you were the one who couldn't be a father. I saw the lab results from your urologist 3 years ago, the ones you keep in a locked drawer at your office. I photographed them. You were going to use me and throw me away too, weren't you?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. The cafe, the world, everything spun out of control. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Sterile. Ethan was sterile. For 5 years, I had lived in hell, branded as a failure. I had endured agonizing treatments, swallowed thousands of bitter pills, and prayed until my knees were raw. Every month, my period was a fresh wave of despair, and all along, he knew. He knew it was his fault, but the coward let me take the blame to protect his fragile ego. He watched me suffer, day after day, and said nothing. Tears poured down my face, not of sorrow, but of white-hot rage. He hadn't just tried to kill my body. He had been slowly murdering my soul for 5 years. Jessica held me tight, crying with me. "Ava, don't," she whispered. "Don't cry for him. This truth is your ultimate weapon. Now you can destroy him." Across the room, Ethan sat like a statue, his face a mask of horror. His deepest, darkest secret was out. Leaving the cafe, I felt like I had been reborn. The accident was a physical rebirth, but this revelation was a spiritual one. For 5 years I had been a prisoner of shame. Now, I was free. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady and cold. "File for a divorce. Effective immediately. I want him to pay for every single one of my tears." We went straight to a copy center and duplicated all the evidence, the cafe recording, the threatening texts from Ethan to Chloe, and the photos of his medical records. We compiled a dossier that would bury him. I also had Jessica draft an official report to the police detailing the murder-for-hire plot and his financial crimes. I returned to the mansion a different woman. I walked in with my head held high. Richard and Carol were watching TV and sneered at me for being out all day. I ignored them and went straight to my room, their insults bouncing off my newfound armor. I began to pack. I took only things of personal value, leaving behind the jewelry and designer clothes. I found our wedding photo. I looked so happy, so full of trust. I took a pair of scissors and cut the photo in half. I crumpled Ethan's image and threw it in the trash. I kept my half, a reminder of the woman I used to be, and the strength I had found. That night, Ethan came home drunk, stumbling into the room and spewing insults. "You're a curse," he slurred. "My life has been hell since I met you." I closed my book and looked at him with pity. "Don't worry, Ethan," I said calmly. "I'll be gone soon, but not before I give you exactly what you deserve." The next morning, I contacted Chloe and arranged to meet her in a quiet park. She arrived looking terrified, wrapped in a scarf and large sunglasses. She tried to run when she saw me, but I called out to her. "Chloe, don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to save your life." She cautiously approached. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I'm done with him." I smiled grimly and showed her a video on my phone. I had recorded Ethan the night before, speaking with another shady-looking man. "Chloe knows too much," Ethan was saying in the video. "She has to be silenced. I'll pay you double what I paid Mitch. I want her to disappear, permanently." Chloe's face went white. The phone dropped from her trembling hands. She finally understood that to Ethan, she was just as disposable as I was. "Please," she begged, grabbing my arm. "Help me. I don't want to die. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. Please, just help me." I looked at her, my anger replaced by a strange sense of pity. "If you want to live," I said, "you will work with me. You will be my witness. You will tell the police everything. Testify against him, and the law will be lenient with you." She nodded furiously, agreeing to everything. I gave her some cash and a plane ticket and told her to go into hiding until it was time. I now had my star witness. The alliance of betrayed women was formed, and our target was singular. The day of reckoning arrived. I went to the market and bought the most extravagant ingredients I could find: lobster, king crab, imported delicacies. I was going to cook one last, magnificent meal for this family, a farewell feast. I spent all afternoon in the kitchen. The aroma filled the house, and Richard and Carol watched me with smug satisfaction, assuming I was finally groveling, trying to get back in their good graces. Ethan came home early. Seeing the splendid meal, his tense expression softened. He, too, thought I had surrendered. We all sat down at the dinner table, a picture of false harmony. I poured everyone a glass of expensive wine. Then I raised my glass. "A toast," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "To family. I cooked this meal with all my heart. Please enjoy it. It might be the last time we're all together like this." Carol paused mid-bite. "What kind of morbid thing is that to say?" I simply smiled, picked up the TV remote, and pressed play. The large screen in the dining room flickered to life. It wasn't a news channel, it was the video from the cafe. The sounds of Ethan and Chloe's argument filled the silent room. Chloe's accusations of murder for hire, Ethan's violent threats, and finally, her screaming revelation of his infertility. Richard dropped his wine glass, shattering it on the floor. Carol's jaw went slack, a piece of lobster falling from her mouth. Ethan's face turned the color of ash. When the video ended, I turned off the TV. "Did you hear that, mother-father?" I asked softly. "Your daughter-in-law isn't the barren one. The person who can't continue your precious family line is your own son, the same son who tried to have me killed for my money." Carol turned on Ethan, her voice trembling. "Is it true, Ethan? Is what she said true? You're sterile? Why did you lie to us?" Ethan couldn't speak. Richard clutched his chest, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "And there's more," I added. "I've already submitted all the evidence of Ethan's embezzlement, bribery, and attempted murder to the police. I imagine they're on their way right now. So please, finish your dinner. The food in prison isn't nearly as good." At the word police, Ethan snapped. He swept the entire contents of the table onto the floor with a furious roar. He lunged at me, his eyes wild, grabbing a fruit knife from the wreckage. "You called the cops?" he screamed. "I'll kill you. If I'm going down, you're coming with me." I was prepared for this. I backed away as his parents tried to restrain him, but in his desperate rage, he threw them off. He lunged, the knife glinting, just inches from my chest. At that exact moment, police sirens wailed outside. A voice boomed over a megaphone. "Ethan Albright, this is the police. Drop the weapon and come out with your hands up." The front door burst open and a SWAT team swarmed in. Ethan froze, the knife clattering to the floor. His rage evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of a cornered animal. Officers tackled him, cuffing his hands behind his back with a final, definitive click. A detective read him his rights as he was dragged away, head bowed in shame. Carol chased after him, her screams echoing through the night. Richard collapsed onto a chair, a broken man. I stood amidst the chaos, feeling no pity, only a quiet finality. This was the justice they had earned. The case of Ethan Albright became a media sensation. With the mountain of evidence and Chloe's damning testimony, the trial was swift. Ethan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thanks to the will and proof of his financial crimes, the court awarded me the entirety of the marital assets, including the mansion. The day the eviction notice was served, Richard and Carol refused to leave, screaming that I was an ungrateful wretch who was throwing them out on the street. But the neighbors, now aware of the whole story, watched them with contempt. With sheriff's deputies supervising, they were forced to pack their bags and leave the mansion for good. They returned to their small hometown in disgrace, where they were shunned by their community. I later heard that Richard died of a heart attack a few months later, and Carol lost her mind, wandering the streets and muttering her son's name. As for me, I sold the mansion. It held too many dark memories. I used a portion of the money to build my parents a beautiful new home and donated the rest to shelters for abused women and children. Before leaving the city for good, I visited Ethan in prison one last time. He was gaunt and gray, looking 20 years older. He apologized, begging for my forgiveness. "I don't hate you anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice even, "but I will never forgive you. You can spend the rest of your life in here reflecting on what you've done." I walked out of the prison and into the bright sunlight, taking a deep breath of free air. The nightmare was finally over. A year later, in the sun-drenched coastal city of Santa Barbara, I opened a small flower shop on a quiet street near the ocean. I named it Serenity. My life was simple now. I woke with the sun, arranged beautiful bouquets, and spent my afternoons walking on the beach. I had no mansion, no luxury cars, no designer clothes, but for the first time in a very long time, I was truly happy. I was at peace. My life was my own, and it was beautiful.